Welcome everybody. This is probably the first poetry reading that will be closed down by the fire marshal for overcrowding. That'll show all those young people with electric guitars what really matters. Thank you. This is the first Authors with Glasses, also known as the Governor's Book Pub of 2013. Thank you all for very much showing up. This is quite phenomenal. And different for us because we have something different for you. Usually we have two presenters who come up sequentially, if two can be in a sequence. Now we will have two presenters simultaneously. Yes. Murmurs of titillation spread through. We're very fortunate that we get to hear the end product of a collaboration that, when I was talking to both of the poets involved, intrigued me to know, and I'm looking forward to it as much as everybody here tonight. So I'm going to introduce both of our poets. Sean Howard is author of two collections of poetry, Local Calls from Cape Breton University Press, and Incitements from the Gasborough Press. His poetry has been widely published in Canada and internationally and anthologized in the Best Canadian Poetry in English in 2011 from Tightrope Books. Sean is adjunct professor of political science at Cape Breton University, and since 1999, and I can attest to this because I've seen him in his natural environment, has been a happy, proud, and lucky to call Manitou his home. And I'll also mention Sean is one of the organizers of the poetry readings in Manitou every August that I'm also very proud to be a host of. And got to have seen a lot of phenomenal poetry out in Manitou. Our second presenter is Mark Silverberg, who is an associate professor who teaches American literature, poetry, and poetics, inter-arts collaborations, and creative writing at Cape Breton University. He is the author of the New York School Poets and the Neo-Avant-Garde from Ashgate, published in 2010, and editor of an upcoming anthology on poetic collaborations, New York School Collaborations, The Color of Vowels. His essays on contemporary literature, theory, and culture have appeared in leading journals and as book chapters. His poetic collaboration or conversation with the late artist Jack Siegel have been presented at the Governor's Book Pub. We all remember that. We were fortunate enough to see a lot of the artwork that Mark interacted with. And will be forthcoming in a volume tentatively titled Broken by Spots of Light, the Jack Siegel poems. Some of his other poetry has appeared in 3 chapbooks and in literary journals. So we're going to hear from them. We'll take a short break, then we'll have the open mic. But right now, I'd like to have you give a big hand to our two presenters, Sean Howard.
Let's see. Thank you. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Laura and Mike, for organizing this and for inviting us. And thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm going to let Sean tell you a little bit about how this got started.
Okay. Well, Mark and I started out on our great adventure in late September 2011. We've been talking about it for a long time, and the plan had been to get going right at the start of the semester. But I had never tried anything like this before, and I was fairly convinced that I wouldn't be any good at it. So I kept finding excuses for delay, agonizing about possible techniques, formats, styles, etc. Finally, in his usual kind and gentle way, Mark suggested the radical expedient of actually writing something. Simply starting with the letter A, with him writing a line, handing it to me responding, handing it back, seeing how it went. What I said was something like, sure, okay, that sounds great. What I was thinking was, well, there's no chance in hell this is going to work, so let's get it over with. Even in the midst of my panic, though, my fear of letting myself down, but more importantly letting Mark down, I was still relieved that he would be writing the first line, figuring he'd give me quite a lot of material to work with, or at least enough rope to hang myself. Here's what happened.
Hey, after all,
The adult afterlife,
starts
to slow you down.
because going slow was the way, or seemed to be the way, or grew to be the way,
And after all, there has to be a way.
back to a start, an A,
But did I have a way as a child?
the way the rain rains or fills a field of vision. Can I still rain my way on an A-shaped field, an A frame? The same
Traditional song, being arranged anon. A theme someone else can vary.
as they make their way downhill or around again.
I'm still not sure, after all, how big a step that was. But it was big enough to get us going. And a year and a bit later, here we are, crazy enough to see if this will work. We've written quite a lot, but have only recently started sending out pieces to magazines. With one early success, the acceptance of 3 poems by the Antigonish Review, which we'd like to read for you now. 2 of the pieces are letter poems. We've now moved through the alphabet from A to Q. The other is what we call a theme poem, and I'll let Mark explain how they're supposed to work.
So, the other poems we write is all of this. I mean, one of this is about being spontaneous, and so we start with a theme, which is things one of us has been thinking about for the week, potentially, or it's something that comes out of we start with writing back and forth, and it may be something that comes out of that. So it comes from something that's happening to us. The first one, I think the first theme poem that we're going to read is called Mask. And this was written last year. I had been, the day before, rehearsing for this odd play that I was in called A Spurt of Blood. And Mindy Carter, the director, had asked us to, in rehearsal, to put on masks and to walk around with masks and emote. And so I had been, as a first-time actor, thinking about masks, and so that was the theme. So with the theme poem, then we come up with the theme and we write together for 5 minutes, or we write separately, but we're sitting together, and we read each other what we've written right there, and then we respond. So the next poem, which is often we go away and write, I respond to Sean's poem, Sean responds to my poem, and then we write a third poem, so then we respond to the response. So each of these poems then ends up with 3 parts, 2 in one person's voice and 1 in the other. So, but before we get to that, a couple more letters. This is E.
Okay, E. Embrace yourself, she urged me. I've had more tempting offers.
Emanating from entirely more urgent arms.
The dream kiss that wakes you every time.
Turning over to find who and what.
Though of course, responsibly, you try to shower the dream away. The doubt you can't allow to nag, drag you.
Outside the moment, the emergence of water from a wall, from nowhere.
As you stand on the sudden ledge, behind the falls, wonder as you step out naked, just how high up you are. G. The grand gestures of the mind, truth, meaning, beauty, goodness. Lord, how hollow in the once great hall.
Going a great distance gone, and then getting up again.
As gently as possible, the hangover of history you got without drinking.
Got from a gathering of books, a Golgotha of signs, deeply skimming the glimming surfaces of the past.
The scales that fall from your eyes to find God in the background. Radiation from his own explosion. Omnipresent fallout.
In an open book, words as waves, punctuation as particles, all of it leaching slowly away. And this is Mask. Where is the face behind the mask? Has it changed? Was it ever? Its sounds are projected, its body new but familiar. To walk across the floor, become stage, become range. Whose story to possess, whose hands to inhabit, trying it on, trying it out. How to get outside of yourself, to cross the stage, wade in someone else's words. Mask as another face, mask another world, such as pose, grotesque, unstable, always about to shatter. Behind the mask, the vulture eye, the ticking heart, the sounds that were unavoidable.
Someone else's words, someone else's story, country, with perhaps an occasional cameo by you. The unavoidably comic tragedy of the actor, the voice you find never, if you want to feel real, your own. The price you pay to give yourself away. And if the boards were stable, no water to tread, would you still be drawn there? If the page wasn't often a blizzard, would you keep plunging in, hoping to find, at last lose, the someone else you somehow came to be? And if the snow stopped, what would they, the other actors, find? Puzzled, digging blue sky, a black mask, nothing else from the drift.
I'm starting to have the eerie feeling that my mask is being worn, my lines mirrored in uncanny echoes no longer my own. Isn't that always exactly what happens in Poe? The benign face of William Wilson, returned, the back of a page, the front of a check, signed away, forged in the real hand, and then what? Once one's spirit has drifted out with the blizzard, the sense of it or the lack, the ellipsis, the false steps, where does one go next when the page returns?
I first started writing poetry out of nowhere in the blizzard still raging in my mid-teens. For many years, though I've always wanted to share my work in public and in print, writing poetry has been an intensely private, intimately solitary, psychologically borderline experience. And I could never have imagined it being any other way. Private, but not personal, by which I mean I can go years without saying I, mine, me, myself in my poems. I like writing about what interests me, and when I'm writing, I rarely do. Well, what does interest me about my life, I usually don't want to write about. Writing with Mark, however, I felt compelled, and also sometimes liberated, to go into some deeply personal spaces, some of them light, and some of them the opposite, in order to respond to him and be true to the spirit of our journey. But truth in poetry is a funny thing. Goethe called his autobiography Poetry and Truth, suggesting at best a close, but also a potentially rocky relationship. And at least as often as my personal voice came through, other voices would appear, unbidden and unexpected. Personas I just let have their say, playing their own parts for their own reasons.
Right, yeah, so I'm thinking about that, thinking about personas and masks and voices. I mean, one thing to know here is that we're not always reading our own words. We've mixed